I studied politics and economics. That took me to journalism, which kind of taught me about filmmaking. And then that took me to the film house, where we've been for 12 years. Sometimes we do think of filmmaking as one thing and commercials as another. But what I would love to see, particularly in Qatar, is those filmmakers trying it out in commercials. And it's not an easy one. It's probably crazy to come on your podcast and yet say filmmaking isn't everything. But it also isn't. I think you've got to, find times to work hard, stay up late, but you've got to also, I think, reinforce yourself and do other things too.
Hi, I'm Lafan and welcome to Ajyal Show Season 2. Have you ever wondered how directors bring people together around their vision? How do they craft a pitch that no one can resist? And what does it take to balance creativity and practicality? Whether it's pitching a film, a commercial campaign, it takes a unique blend of creativity and communication to make ideas connect, to make people connect with ideas. Today, we're joined by a filmmaker who excels at this, with over a decade of experience working with huge brands like FIFA, Interpol, TikTok, Aston Martin, and so many more. As the co-founder of the Film House, he has mastered the art of using words and visuals to make his vision clear, compelling, and impossible to ignore. So how does he do it? And what lessons can we learn from him? Without further ado, help me in welcoming our guest, Omar Khalifa, to the show.
Thank you, Lafan.
How you doing?
How are you doing? That was quite something, quite an introduction. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Of course. I'm really honored to have you here with us today.
Thank you.
And I'm sure a lot of people, after hearing that beautiful introduction, would ask themselves, how does Omar, how did he get there? So I'd love if you could tell me a little bit about your journey.
Well, I think my journey is a little unusual in that I studied politics and economics and international relations. That took me to journalism, which kind of taught me about filmmaking. And then that took me to the film house, where we've been for 12 years. So I wonder if there's a continuous thread through all of those things. I think I've always said to people, thinking outside of the box or acting outside of the box. So I'm quite a self-taught individual. And I think throughout that journey, which was about 20 years, 15, 20 years, I've managed to pick up skills, teach myself them how to film, how to edit, how to sell, because you kind of made me sound like a car salesman at some point, which is a skill too. And yeah, here we are, still learning.
How was that like, studying politics, and what were kind of some of the things that you picked up studying there, and what type of experiences did you go through?
So I studied politics and economics, about 5% economics, 95% politics. 3-year course. It was in Newcastle in the north of England, so great city, amazing city if anyone's ever been. And I thrived, I think, actually, because I think one of the secrets was coming off the reading list. So when you're studying, they assign you essay, dissertation questions, and here's the 10 books you should read, and then evolve your questions. But I always found can I bend the rules a little bit? And if I read this and get influenced by this and write about this, it's actually more interesting to the tutors to read something that was a little bit more innovative than the 100 same essays that they were getting. So when I kind of unlocked that, I found a connection with the tutors and the work I was doing. And I just got closer to my subjects. British politics at the time was probably my least favorite thing. It was the least interesting. But naturally, because of who I am, Middle Eastern politics was very interesting to me.
And did you get to kind of explore kind of that side of, politics? Did you get to explore it outside of just uni?
The nature of politics? Was I an activist, that kind of thing?
Did you work in politics, journalism after?
Kind of, yeah. I was writing for a local magazine, and during my master's, which was in Manchester, I worked for local government in social care. So there's the kind of local council level. Yeah, so I've always been interested in social justice. And in some ways, if you see some of my work, I've done a lot of work for Shafala, for example, people with disabilities, Down syndrome, autism, the Day for Persons with Disabilities. These are really important for me, and I think my strongest films, actually. And believe it or not, some of the lowest budget ones. So that is something that's probably carried through social justice, journalism, the truth to power, voice to the voiceless. These are really important concepts for me. And while we make commercials at the Film House for a lot of our brands, I think a lot of those socially oriented organizations we love to work with as well, because it allows me to maybe express myself in that domain.
Usually when people hear the word politics, they kind of go like, oh, what do I want to do with that? And my question is, how do you go from politics to filmmaking? What was the bridge?
It was the process. So in 2006, I moved to Qatar, and I was working for Al Jazeera English. It was pre-launch for English. I joined in the multimedia team. So I was there for a total of 3 years. Then I moved to programs for another 3 years. I was at Al Jazeera for 6 years to the day, and I met my wife there. That's on the side. But how did I move into filmmaking? Well, when I was at Al Jazeera, it was the DSLR revolution, and I was young enough to be on forums. These days, I think Twitter was just getting going. Actually, it sounds crazy, doesn't it, to say those things? So there's a lot of information out there, enough to be self-taught. And I was the guy in Al Jazeera that had this Canon 7D, and everyone was so curious about it. It's this, handheld thing that had shallow depth of field, and everyone was trying to jam it in everywhere. So I remember shooting second camera for a program in the English programs department. And I look back at that, and it jarred so much. But everyone loved this idea of shallow depth of field, that they were like, yeah, get it in there, get it in. It just didn't work at all. But yeah, it allowed me. I was editing on FP7, Final Cut Pro 7, yeah, and I was just self-taught all the way. I bought a Sony Handycam and this thing called a 2-Neal adapter, which allowed me to have shallow depth of field on a Handycam. I bought a Canon 50mm lens, and I was going around Doha. And it led me to create this, off-the-cuff series called Shades of Doha, where I would tell stories about people who I felt were the fabric of society. So it was like the Nepali barber or the Afghan tailor. And I made these little snippets, 3-minute films, and was expressing myself. And I came across LUT programs like Magic Bullet looks. So I was doing all this on the side, and I think I was getting this kind of creativity out of my system, while at the same time being in Al Jazeera, surrounded by some incredible talent. I was learning about program making while contributing to it. And I look back now, and I think I was probably their first millennial, because I was very itchy and eager to just grow and drive new processes forward. So weirdly, I was shooting, editing. I ended up hosting part of a magazine show. I created Al Jazeera English's first short form program strand called Frames, which I believe still plays today. And so really, I learned in the place, but I think in some forms of stasis, I also just took that and went around Doha and expressed myself. Maybe I was the first content creator, I don't know. But if you look back at some of the stuff I did, it was very art-ridden and expressive.
Yeah, I mean, you heard it here first. The first content
creator. Quite the claim. I'm sure there's someone like 50 years ago. But, yeah.
So you said you took your Canon 7D with you to Al Jazeera. So was there something, were you always interested in cameras or like filming even before you got to Al Jazeera?
Yeah, a little bit. I made some films that were kind of James Bond-esque films with my friends growing up. And I had a friend who's much more into film than I was, and he's gone off to make some YouTube shows and sold them to Netflix and things like this. Those incredible stories. But I took a gap year and I worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers when I was 19 and decided I didn't want to do this after I graduated. I said, this kind of consultant world is not for me. And then I traveled to a few countries after that, and it just kind of opened my worldview, I think, in doing that. So in that time, I also changed my degree. I was going to do English and French. And then I met someone, we were talking about politics. I became very interested, so I completely changed my degree to politics and economics. So yeah, film. I think film as an art form has always been very interesting to me. But I guess I look back and it's maybe just a very itchy creative person, because I've written 3 kids' books. I had an art installation, which was Qatar's first public art installation. It was on the walls here. 3 by 4 meter multiple exposure photography portraits. So I've done a bit of that, and I think film at the time was a great expressive format for me, and a learning journey. So at Al Jazeera, I think I was able to hone that, take from it, hit a glass ceiling, leave, and then start the film house with Justin.
And did you find yourself, like, I'm sure, like, if you had your Canon 7D and you were going and doing so many different projects, I'm sure that there were some things that you felt maybe worked really well and things that maybe didn't work so well. And how did you deal with that type of thing, that trial and error?
Well, that's it, trial and error, isn't it? If you don't do it, you'll never know. So I guess because I didn't have work pressures to do that, one of the things I also did, and this is probably where the filmmaking and editorial storytelling came into play, was I discovered these Nepali migrants who are coming here to work. I was looking to get a visa to travel to Nepal, so I went to the embassy and I saw all these guys in this room. They were stranded because they came to Doha on a promise of a job, but they were swindled back home, and perhaps here also by agencies that may not have existed. And I thought, well, this sounds like an interesting story to tell. So I applied that kind of news ethic, and I was filming. So it was video journalism. And at Al Jazeera, there was this one guy, Casey, who I just wanted to be. He was the video journalist sent into conflict zones, one-man band. I was like, I really want to be this guy. So I think that was some influence. I never quite was that guy, but it was still the inspiration.
You mentioned the DSLR Revolution. So having kind of like that camera, and I think right now we're in a time where I think cameras in general, whether they be through an actual like physical camera or your phone, it's just become so accessible. But how do you feel like that DSLR revolution kind of started making filmmaking something accessible for the general public?
It's a phenomenal thing. I'm very interested in the user-generated content creator space, that kind of marketplace, which is interesting because we have a film production company. So you might say that these, the fact that anyone can film anything and they have the power, the tool in their hand to tell those stories, that might upend our world, and even individuals are becoming brands themselves as influencers, persons of influence, content creators. And I think that's the direction that we're heading in. So it might compete with what the film house is as an entity, but we're embracing it. We're often working very closely with content creators and influencers who have a great repertoire of filming stuff themselves. So it feels like a natural evolution, really, from the DSLR thing, as the technology's got smaller, the ability to edit and use new tools is more accessible. So I guess I just kind of jumped on my timeline was the DSLR thing, but it's continually evolving. The other interesting thing is at Al Jazeera, it was a time where people were in conflict zones and the quality of the phones was not so strong. So a lot of news organizations like Al Jazeera were evaluating, can we broadcast this? Is it verified? Do we know where it's from? Is it truth? So this was all happening during my time at Al Jazeera English. And now, of course, everybody's a journalist if they're in a conflict zone, which is incredible because they can get truth out there that's unfiltered.
So some of the films that you mentioned that you kind of started working on your own with your camera were things that maybe you connected to personally. But if we take now the perspective of the film house, so a company that's making content for different type of clients, how do you approach understanding a client and trying to make something that feels right for them? Because you know what feels right for you, but how do you know what that is for someone else?
You really have to put yourself in their shoes. You have to come to understand who they are, what their vision is, what their mission statement is. Sometimes it goes against your natural grain because you might feel, I'm a kind of indie aesthetic type of guy, but this client is a little stiffer and corporate and they're B2B. They're not appealing to me. They're actually appealing to a completely different market. So you just have to put yourself in their shoes. And in doing that, you have to shed your what you think you know, and just, I guess, kind of apply that knowledge to satisfying what the brand is hiring you for. And then at the same time, putting your creative spin on it. Because, I've got so many treatments on the shelf or in the Dropbox where I think they're incredible ideas for X, Y, Z reasons. And not just personal reasons, because they're brilliant creative stories. But sometimes they just don't work. And it can be heartbreaking sometimes as a creator when you've come with this amazing idea and it's going to do incredibly well out there, but the client just didn't sign it off. So it could, persistence as well. Otherwise you're just going to end up heartbroken all the time.
Could you tell us about the process of pitching and coming up with treatments?
Sure. I mean, everybody has their own way, but my particular way is sometimes I have the idea ready to go, but I tend to get out my Apple Notes and I hammer away there. I have a formula for how I do it, in that I'll start with an introduction, a bit of a loose thing that I'll come back to. It's almost like writing an essay or dissertation in university, where sometimes you do the introduction last. Or is that just me? But then I think about references, and then I think about how I translate those references into what the client wants or is. I talk about look and feel. This is what your commercial is going to make your audience feel, and the aesthetic of it. Talk about that, the sound, the music. So if you imagine all of these things as headings, if we have the luxury of time, we'll get storyboards made. If we can do the storyboards, it's so much clearer for the client to understand what I'm on about. Because if you're showing a reference and I don't know, it's LeBron doing something and it's a black and white ad, they can kind of get it, but they don't always know how that translates to who they are. Yeah. So I'm on my Apple Notes, chapters, going through it, writing. I put that together and then we send it. We have a designer in the film house. We send it to the designer. Sometimes I will make a kind of collage-based storyboard, and that's improved upon by a designer, all packaged together into the treatment document. At the back end of it, a little bit about me, things I've made. Hopefully that's the kind of rubber stamping that they can trust us to make these films. And fingers crossed, that's how it goes.
I'm curious, do you just submit that document as it is, or do you have to present it? And then when you come to present it, how do you translate those things from this physical document to something that's received?
So these days, a lot of clients just want it on WhatsApp. And then we may never hear from them again. Other clients have a procurement process and they'll reach out to a number of production companies. And we may submit 1, 2, 3 ideas with corresponding budgets. So it's very rigid process. But yeah, sometimes we have to go in and present. The worst thing you can do is put your treatment up on the projector and go through that. Because often the treatment is quite text heavy. What the client needs to be looking at is moving picture or stills, just image. And if you feel confident enough in the idea to have one statement per slide unless you also have the storyboards where you can be a bit more meticulous, then please do it. Less is more all the time. Say less, and the client will probably bite harder on the idea. There's also this other phase that once you get over the line, if you've won it, you end up having the PPM, and perhaps people are interested in that, but that's the pre-production meeting. Amazing. We've won the job. The treatment is liked. We're off. We're rolling. But before we start moving into production, we have to assemble all the elements and get the client approval on them. Okay, so that's like the locations where we're going to film. Does it fit with what they want to do? You know, inside, outside, whatever it is, restaurants, homes. The talent, is this particular talent reflective of who they want in their commercial, you know, for whatever reasons. Sometimes the music as well, if we're ready. So all of this you need approval on before you move into the production phase. Because if you don't get approval on that, it just becomes a circus afterwards. Because you can make a film, shoot it, and they're like, well, I didn't agree on that guy, or why is this in that house? And then your film may never finish.
When you were talking about having maybe some creative ideas that you're super, super excited about, and, you know, you want to come and pitch this idea to someone, right? How do you build that level of trust with your clients to try and convince them of something that feels a little bit more maybe out of the box or a bit new?
It's difficult with larger clients because they have to uphold their kind of brand stature. You know, they can't mess around too much. And every project is different. You know, what we think, oh, no, it doesn't matter, you know, because maybe a window is slightly blown out and you can't read something. It's not a big deal. No one's going to crucify you for that. But it's really important to them, you know, because millions of people might see this, will see this product. So WhatsApp helps, playing paddle, things like this. You know, I would definitely encourage, where you can, if you see openings for that, be personable. Don't be afraid to loosen up and feel. You know, this is coming out of the box that you feel you're in. Just because you work in a production company and you supply a client with films doesn't mean that you're a person at the end of the day, right? You know, as are they. And there are plenty of bridges that you can make with your clients. So yeah, WhatsApp is you know, direct to people, has made that communication easier. And so just trying to be friends with the client is helpful.
How do you kind of maintain still a high level of creativity while having some form of limitation?
I think that's really the crux of the challenge. You know, so on the one hand, you've got the product or campaign that they want to launch. Then sometimes there are trends and they want to jump on the back of those trends. So you think, okay, well, everybody's seen this version of that trend. How can we apply that thing, whether it's a kind of CGI off the cuff thing, to this particular, I don't know, sports campaign that they want to run? So I think you've just got to consistently write. And often in our treatments, we won't just go with one idea. We'll go with like a few. And sometimes you put a rubbish one in there to persuade them to go with the good ones. But yeah, I mean, it's not easy. And that's what you can really wreck your head with day to day. It can take, you know, sometimes you've got an idea and it just, sometimes you have a brief and the idea can come to you in a minute. You already know it's in the back of your head, it's on the shelf in the back of your head. Others can take weeks. And there's no knowing sometimes. There's no shortcut to it. You might have a specialism. You might have a desire to do only, I don't know, food-based films. And because you're in that world and your Pinterest boards and your Instagram collections, all of that, your inspiration is kind of already there. You're already locked and loaded in that respect. So it's easier for you to apply creative storytelling in that realm. But yeah, like anybody, I'm influenced by what's coming out, what other people are doing, what other people are trying, and we try and take that internationally and apply it domestically.
Wow. So you've thrown the word treatment around a lot, and I'm sure maybe some people don't know what that is. So I'd love if you could tell me what a treatment is.
A treatment is our first creative response to a client brief. So normally when we are asked or are briefed by a client, there are three things that we tend to reply with in the first calculated reply. So it's the budget. If we don't know what it is, it's the treatment, which is kind of the director's vision, and then it's the timeline, how long it's going to take. We sometimes know most of the time there is not enough time. Most of the time the budget is not what we want it to be. But it doesn't mean we can't be creative. And in the treatment, often you have a kind of tonal introduction. This is why I think this idea is good and is going to work for you. It's a big sales pitch. And the rest of it really helps if you have references. You know, just like a good film is like this plus this, and people get it straight away. You know, a creative treatment, if you've got a reference and you can say it's for an airline, say the treatment or the brief is from an airline, and my reference is from, I don't know, Nike. And you'll say, okay, what Nike did with this particular product, we're going to do for you, your particular product, in terms of look and feel, aesthetic, the cadence of the edit, the voiceover, the music, you know. So oftentimes we'll have 3 or 4 different references, and we'll pick it apart and say, we're going to do this for you.
Right. So one treatment can have multiple references in it.
Oh, yeah.
So it doesn't have to be just one.
No. Okay. One treatment can have multiple ideas in it, concepts, which helps because they hopefully will choose one of them.
For sure. So you have your treatment. That's kind of like your let's say your physical proof. But how do you kind of take that physical manifestation of the idea and actually pitch it in a way that, one, makes the client understand, and then 2, to convince them, to persuade them?
How do you do that? I don't know. It's firstly, you've got to be confident in the idea you have. You can't really sell an idea, 1, if it's not really yours, or 2, if you don't believe in it. You have to really want to do this for the client. I think experience helps pitching. I can't remember pitching to the mirror or to, family members or the dog, but I would say it's very valuable to try that. And like I said, failing. Like I've been in so many boardrooms where I've pitched an idea and it's just silence and it's so awkward. I'm trying to motivate myself. Say, this is great and we're going to do this and this. And then it's like, okay, thank you. And you just walk out of there thinking, I'm never going to hear from them again. And that's okay. And you think about, okay, sometimes it's not you even, So part of it is like, what could I do better? And the other part of it is like, actually, I did all right. And it was them, it's not me.
What bit of advice would you give to someone to kind of continue that perseverance, even after being rejected? Because I'm sure that, it's a subjective thing at the end of the day. So what tips would you give to people who are maybe in the field or want to get into the field about rejection?
Well, it's a life lesson, isn't it? Resilience. I think having resilience is super important in any portion of our lives. So in the grand scheme of things, pitching an idea and failing isn't that important, But to some people it is, and I appreciate that. So I think the more you do it, the more you fail, the tougher you become. And I think the more confident and comfortable you become. So maybe you're not overloading yourself with pressure. So that you can walk in there and say, I've done this like 20 times. Some felt good, some complete misses. This is the idea. I really believe in it. Sometimes you have better ideas, 1 week than you do previously. So having that confidence, you think, yeah, I'm really going to sell this. And sometimes the idea sells itself. It's obvious, you know. I've pitched, I've sent email treatments, and then you get a WhatsApp message back saying that treatment was amazing. You know, some clients have told me my WhatsApp pitches are better than my real life pitches. And I've taken that. I'm thinking I might use that, you know, because sometimes less is more too. Previously, where I've had like 20 pages and I felt like the client doesn't even a lot of the time read what you put. As long as the visuals are there, the peripheral trust is there as well. And that's where the references come in, I think, whether they're yours in your portfolio to say, hey, I did X, Y, Z for similar entities. I'm going to do exactly the same or better for you. That comes in handy. So, you know, often it's not just, you know, it's like an onion, isn't it? So many layers, so many skins to this thing that it's not just one document that's going to win you the job. So I think building that feeling, what else can I develop to win these jobs, to win over this client, I think is really important too.
What's most curious to me is that you were saying that sometimes like you found yourself sending kind of like these concepts through WhatsApp. Yeah. And like for me as someone who works in marketing, sometimes the biggest difficulties that we face sometimes when pitching ideas is that we have things written out and, you know, ideas. And sometimes even with that, maybe a client finds it difficult to still understand the idea. So do you think even if you are sending these proposals, let's say through WhatsApp, that it's an important part to also present the idea itself? Yeah.
Yeah, it really depends on your client. You know, the person who works for an agency who says my WhatsApp pitches are better than my real ones knows it's funny to say that, and we have that relationship, so that's okay, right? Other times you have to absolutely be in a room with them or they just won't get it, you know. So it just really depends. You got to have that malleability, you know, that dexterity to know how to pitch your idea.
How you can manage to balance creativity between a team when budget is low, time is short?
Yeah.
How do you push them to kind of get that level of quality in that short amount of time and those resources?
Yeah, well, speaking for the film house, we've just such a brilliant bunch of people there. And they're all segmented, right? So we have 4 directors in-house. We have, I think, 5 producers and lots of really important people as the glue in the middle. So people are on the books to do great creative work and to realize that work and deliver that work on time. So that's it, right? Just having the right chess pieces on the board is super important to making sure like our film house machine gets everything that the client needs.
How important would you say is collaboration between these people when it comes to actually creating these ideas that you want to pitch?
Very important, yeah, because say if I send a brief in our WhatsApp group, but everyone's very busy, nothing's going to get done. And if we don't motivate and work for each other collaboratively, assign work with each other so that people aren't overloaded and therefore have enough time to be interested in this particular job, then that entire collaboration is, if we get it right, is going to be great. It's going to succeed.
You said you have references, right? So how wide, let's just say, is that like research for ideas? Like how deep do you guys look for ideas when you're coming up with a concept?
I think directors look in different places for different inspiration. I think all of us are inspired and follow other directors. There are sites these days like iCandy, even FrameSet. You know, these resources are really good for putting your treatments together. And actually they only really came about in the last year or so, because we used to really struggle to convey visually in our treatments what we actually wanted to do for the client. You know, I could have a picture of a young Qatari boy smiling, but that's not what I'm going to do for you. You know, it will have a different, there are lanterns, it's a different aesthetic, there's a certain turn and look and a glint in his eye, and there are other people in the room and there's food on the, you know, there's just so much more going on. But these days we can generate, using AI tools even, we can generate some pretty good images that are closer to the potential vision that we have. Other people, and I've gone through phases like this where, other art forms, artwork, paintings, museums, people walking through town, it really can resonate. Sometimes when you're not looking for it, it comes. And for some reason, I think I work kinetically. My best ideas seem to come when I'm in motion. So if I'm sat on a train or I'm on an airplane, and I know that I've spent 7 hours coming back from the UK just hammering away on my phone's Apple Notes nonstop, and it's just there's something about that, the movement that helps that. So yeah, lots of different places: Pinterest, Instagram.
Based on your experience in pitching, do you feel like you've noticed the pattern on what sells the quickest?
The pattern of what sells the quickest?
Yeah, is there one maybe common thread that you've seen?
No, I don't know. I think all clients are different, and they all need something different. We have milestones on the calendar, right? So we have Ramadan, Eid, we have National Day, Sports Day. So we kind of know that they're going to want something with that resonance. So obviously we're not going to pitch wildly out of those spaces. But yeah, there's not really... Well, I think we all have our formulas, and my treatments have a particular formula. But yeah, I think there's always newness, and I think that's what's so beautiful about the job, that there's variety in it, and maybe that's what keeps us young, or maybe the opposite, wears us out, keeps us super stressed because we can't get a grasp of it sometimes.
Because sometimes, like, if I think about it, like for me, I know when I watch a film, right, the first thing that strikes me is how it makes me feel. It's kind of like, that's the number one thing. I have some film geek friends that the first thing that they notice is the colors, or, the certain type of shots. So based on also some of the experiences that you've had, do you feel like there are sometimes times where aesthetics carry versus when the stories carry, or is it always kind of this idea where they kind of have to work together?
No, I think different layers dominate for sure. Like sometimes there might be a really stylistic hook, and oftentimes that's what we're seeing with lately, in particular with content creators and the transitions and the kind of whippersnapper edits. That seems to be what people enjoy these days, particularly for the TikTok and Instagram. But occasionally, we were quite lucky at the Film House because we have a great DOP, Christopher Moon. So I think a lot of the time the cinematography helped, particularly early on in the days of the Film House. Our cinematography just raised the standard of production in Qatar. And I felt like a lot of entities followed on from that. But at the same time, not to be cliche, it is the art of storytelling is always going to be very close to the most important thing that you need in your pitch. And I personally forget this sometimes. I get a bit obsessed with the look of something, and I forget that actually I might not be writing enough substance into it, narrative, not even dialogue, but just arc, even if it's a 30-second commercial. I can't just flash really cool looking, heavily graded things all the time. There has to be something in the belly of it. And but at the same time, yeah, it depends what you're pitching and why you're pitching it. Some sports aesthetics are great. We're selling trainers where we're going to see a lot of footwear, and how are we going to utilize that? Are we selling tourism? Well, they're going to want to see. The audience are going to want to see these different places. So how are we going to portray them? Oftentimes, people don't really care about narrative in that respect. They just want to see happy people in all of these places. So, I mean, it's been a decade since we've been producing this kind of content here in Qatar. So I do understand the kind of metrics of what certain clients want. And so I know not to overwrite these days. But yeah, just to summarize, yeah, I think there are different different times where you would push maybe look more than narrative.
You've worked in ads and you've made films. Is there one you prefer over the other? And then what are the similarities and differences that you see between them?
So what was interesting was coming from Al Jazeera and not really having, I didn't study film, not really having a filmmaking background, was that leap from making television programs, very small crews, to making commercials where you need 10 people to get a camera up and shoot anything, and you get one shot in like 5 hours. It's still a frustration to this day for me. But having said that, it's still filmmaking, and you still have a lot of the same people and crew and direction, So the tools change, but there are differences. So when I've made films, obviously there's a lot more development and in terms of script and planning. I think we're afforded a bit more time to do that as well, because we know that the film would need it. But with commercials, they just have to happen real fast. So I guess pace is different.
And how would you describe the feeling of, pitching something one day in an office versus actually reaching the end where now you've seen it actually distributed? How is that feeling like?
Good and bad. Yeah, because so many, you're right. You make a film 3 times, right? You've probably heard this 1,000 times. So when you ideate it, and that's our treatment phase. Let's talk about commercials, perhaps. We ideate it, then we actually make the film. And a lot of directors hate being on set. They just kind of want their idea to be realized ASAP. And then in the edit, So throughout this whole process, you have to work with different people. Okay, and sometimes there's cohesion, sometimes there's not. And even in that lack of cohesion, a better product might come out. Just because there is cohesion doesn't mean you're going to... Sometimes there's less, right? Because there's less friction. I think in friction, you get better results a lot of the time. And then you have clients who totally ruin your film. No, you're making a film for someone else a lot of the time. And I can't deny there's validation when your film goes out there and you start seeing the comments and everyone loves it. Even if you thought the film wasn't quite what you wanted and it didn't honor your initial vision, but hey, if hundreds of people seem to like it, so cool, it might make the reel, So I think the idea of actually just getting something made, it's not easy. So I think just stripping it all back, the fact that you can make something, get it done, get it approved, and we're going through these processes right now, actually, feels good. Getting over all these like finish lines is really important. But yeah, sometimes films go out and you've worked really hard on them and they are awful. And you just want to never see them again. And that happens. Is
there ever moments when you kind of pitch an idea or a treatment and the client might ask you to kind of make kind of like a taster, or something to just kind of like really hook them in?
The audience. Yeah, all the time. When we get our brief, there are like 10 different formats of deliverables that we have to correspond to. And it's like, 60 seconds, 45 seconds, 30, 15, a 10. Oh, can we have a 6 as well? Oh, we need it in 16:9, 9:16, 1 by 1. And so it's important because this is really important for brands. You're on so many different platforms these days. I think what a lot of brands are also realizing is that they need different tonalities for different platforms. So their voice on TikTok should necessarily be different to their voice on Instagram or YouTube. There's different implied lengths. Some brands are even thriving on Pinterest, for example. So yeah, it's kind of horses for courses, to use a Shakab connected reference. Yeah, and I actually like it. It's funny, like some of the films that I've made, the short films, and for clients, like the Interpol ones, for example, there's something about a hard-hitting, 1 minute trailer that I want everyone to see versus the 15 to 20 minute output that I want less people to see. Because there's just an energy to the teaser where people are like, oh God, what, is this, how long is this? What is this thing that you've made? You made it all here? This is crazy. So I love conveying that. And I don't like disappointing people when they watch the main film, which can happen.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I am one of the people that are in the team trailers. I love trailers. Some people are very against trailers. They have no, it's going to ruin it for me.
Yeah, and they're right. Like, we have plenty of people who don't watch the trailers, right? But they don't want to spoil the film. And I completely respect that.
Have you ever had a moment where you've got a treatment approved and you start working on a whole thing and then it goes live and it just flops?
Flops with the audience?
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah.
And how do you deal with that?
This is it. Just, not being afraid of failure and knowing that more are coming. And maybe you get kind of one golden egg in a basket of many eggs. So that happens. Some go further than you could possibly imagine, So you just have to learn to accept it and not obsess over it so much. It's really important to not, because I think even personally, I've done that, and it cuts deep sometimes where you've had a really good idea and the client's just not interested in it, and you keep pushing it and you're like, wow, it just makes so much sense. It's so obvious, but it just doesn't. So over time, you learn to build the thickest skin. And that's why I've got so many incredible ideas in the Dropbox folder. that sometimes you pull out 5 years later, hey, this could work for this new client really well, And because it's been such a long time since maybe that reference first came out in 2015, when you can reapply it again and think, hey, this feels original and new. I see a lot of people, we were talking about when I was first going out there and just experimenting with the filmmaking, and I was learning about tilt shift photography and all of these things. And I see these trends come back around with the new, this is why I was saying I might be the first original content creator, because I was messing around with this stuff, learning it from forums, not even like YouTube tutorials or anything like that, which really dates me. But it's kind of cool to see it come back around and be done probably in like 10 minutes as opposed to 10 days. Like
it's full circle moment.
Yeah,
no pun intended. Do you feel like, actually I feel like creatives, we have a lot of things in common. One is that we love making things. And two, one of the things at least, is that a lot of us sometimes go into moments where we feel like there's a creative block. I don't know how to expand ideas. I don't know whether that be time or whether that be just too much pumping, So in the context of like having a team, how do you deal with that type of creative block, and how do you kind of like persevere through it?
Unblock it.
Yeah, unblock it.
Personally, how do I personally unblock it? Sometimes I just completely forget about it and do other things. It's amazing. Like, if I could be sweating it all day and I know a deadline is looming, but you know what? It's just not coming. It's not coming. And you have to be honest with yourself. You go do something else, all of a sudden your frequencies change, your energy change, the speed of your blood movement is changing. You've been exposed to different experiences because in your drive that happened, or you arrived to this place and this happened, or you tried this different food, and suddenly things are moving. So I think trusting yourself to know that can happen. It's okay to just forget about it for a little while. It's also okay to just not do it sometimes. I suppose we have the luxury of that in a company where we might get a brief and maybe some of us are too busy to take it on. But actually, it just might not sit. You have to be honest with yourself and think, in the luxury of having other creators and writers, actually, part of me would really love to do a good film for this, but I know I'm going to suck at it. This guy or these other guys are going to do so much better at this. So you can kind of hand it off. So you never get creative block in the first place. You're just very honest with yourself and think, well, it's not my cup of tea.
I feel like the stereotype about commercials is always like, oh, they're trying to get you to sell something. But how important do you think is that human element, you know, of making commercials and commercial campaigns?
Human element in the film or in the making of it?
I think both, yeah.
It's everything really, isn't it? You know, I think we all want to be touched by things that we watch. I think they resonate with us. So for me in particular, as I mentioned, social justice, all these themes are really important to me. And, you know, to make films that promote education, discourse, dialogue, peace, accessibility, things like this, that these are really important human values. And so that, to me personally, is really important. So being able to intrinsically imbue that in the films that we make and have my audience feel something for these films and maybe make a change, maybe donate something, maybe think differently when they maybe see people with disabilities, you know, things like that. That's really important to me, you know.
And how about the human element of actually working with people, networking, building relationships with others?
Yeah, it's everything really. Yeah, and I think you've got to try and make yourself unforgettable in certain respects, because I think people won't want to do anything with you if they don't like you, or they'll at least try their best not to. So you want to make yourself, you know, amiable, you know, fun to work with. You know, I'm always going on at my team about having great snacks, you know, and if they're listening to this, they will know. Good, clean food, a lot of fruits, stuff, taking care of the client, you know, these kind of things. I remember being on set. We were servicing a production, which means, you know, we're the local production company, and this huge UK-based production company comes in to make the big film, and they're traveling around the world and so on. And I don't normally go to set in these circumstances, but I did because I knew some senior clients were there. So that's important as well, a bit of that kind of thing. But I realized it was me offering the client places to sit, or can I get you a cup of tea? You know, these kind of things that the big company weren't, you know. And that keeps coming up as an example of how to take care of people. Like, they didn't forget that. They keep bringing it up, you know. So making yourself memorable with these good, kind touch points, I think is really important too. Sometimes it's beyond the filmmaking. It's just about, we could be doing anything, but are we doing it together? Are we having fun? Are we trying for each other? It just so happens we're making a film, and it's going to be a good one, is the intention.
And for people kind of starting out, wanting to kind of know how to, you know, get into pitching or get into commercial campaigns, you spoke a lot about how you found yourself self-teaching a lot of things. Do you advise that people do that? Do you advise that people go on the hunt for information? And how do you think it's an easy way for them to do that?
Yeah, I do, more than ever, because it's so interesting. I've been talking to a lot of people, fellow dads, where I'm paying a fortune for my kids' education, and I feel like they're being educated into a world that they won't know or recognize. You know, AI is changing everything, education in particular. So we have so many resources out there that people are doing it already. You know, they don't necessarily need my encouragement, that you can just log on to YouTube and learn anything you want to know. And I think, though, the important bit is acting upon that knowledge, trying it, because I think that's where a lot of people fall short. So you can see so many tutorials, but if you're not actually doing it, you're not building your repertoire, yourself, your brand, your ability, and therefore people don't know you can do it. So they won't hire you, they won't work with you. I'm all for experimentation, getting out there, doing things. I speak from experience. You know, even, you know, I've written a comic. It's horrible, but it was such a good process. I'd never written. I didn't understand the ways to write for comics, and I've learned that it's phenomenal writing for panels. Like, it's such an interesting thing. Working with illustrators, that was great. Kids books, I thought, I really want to write a kids book, so I did, and I've written 3 now. The art, I not just the multiple exposures, but I created these statuettes which were picked up. There was the New York Times Art for Tomorrow conference that has been here a few times, so I had an exhibition based on that. If I didn't just get out there and do these things, these things would never happen, So always act upon your best interests and learn and expose yourself. Don't be afraid. It's okay. Like, we're always going to fail, and that's the number one bit of advice I would give to people.
How do you manage to find the balance between, like you said, you've done your children's books, but then you're also doing commercial campaigns? How do you find that balance?
I think I found the balance now, but as a 43-year-old, your body lets you know that you may have not been finding balance. So it's super important. And I think in my circumstance, having kids, it's like my head's in different spaces now. I have different obligations, responsibilities, and areas of pleasure, really. It's cool to hang out. When I didn't have kids, I was obsessing with the work, and I had time to do that. These days, less so. But it's probably crazy to come on your podcast and yet say filmmaking isn't everything. But it also isn't. I think you've got to find times to work hard, stay up late, try things, do all that. But you've got to also, I think, reinforce yourself and do other things too, just to find that balance, for sure. Like me right now, I'm opening a climbing gym because I think like wellness and health is really important, more so than ever. And so balance is super important, really important. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't give it your all in the spaces that you care about.
And how do you think people can move towards building their confidence within their own content or the content that they're making for clients?
Confidence in their own content. Unfortunately, it probably comes with validation. It depends a lot on what other people think, doesn't it? It's hard to be 100% confident in yourself if no one else thinks you're any good. It's just a horrible human truth, right? You have to somehow put good work. There's so many people who do great work and no one really sees it, and they kind of wallow, and then they choose not to carry on with it anymore. So I just think it touches on this idea of persistence, and it doesn't matter if you fail first time. You just got to keep going. You've got to, and you will get better. Especially if you find the right groups. We get emails a lot of the time. People want to work with the film house, or we get scripts that they want us to develop. And I feel maybe they think that the film house is a safe zone. They're going to elevate this idea and stuff. So, it's actually similar to things that I would say to my kids, in that, your environment is so important to you in terms of your own personal growth. And, don't hang out with bad kids, too much. They are a lot more fun, I guess. But because that helps your personal growth. It's the same for all of us when we're creating. If we feel we're working with the right people, the right partners, everyone sitting in this room is helping to make this podcast something special. And everyone has their own roles, and we can get good together, But if you're not really in those zones, I think you might never really take the chance. And if you don't take the chance, you'll never do the thing that maybe ends up with validation and lets you know that you're good at it.
I wanted to kind of take it a step back and go back to your days in Al Jazeera. When you think about the connections with people that you've made there and the things that you've learned, do you find yourself practicing some of those things where you are now?
Film production can have a lot of excess baggage. I don't mean people, I just mean spend. You know, I know you can do a lot with less, and I'm constantly going on about that to the staff. But we all fall into our patterns and what we know, right? You know, so it's not always easy. It's easy to say, you know, spend less. But I've just achieved a lot in Al Jazeera with a smaller crew than in the commercial world, I guess is what I'm saying. So that's one thing. Just making programs, actually. The formula of who does what, you know, the script writing, approvals, rewriting. A lot of that formula is quite similar. The offline, the online, you know, deadlines, all of these things.
And now if we zoom out real big, so you started with politics and economics, to commercial ads and commercial campaigns now. And although you alluded to it at the beginning, but I'm going to ask you the question is, do you feel like there was a common thread between all of those that really gets you kind of keeps that hunger for creating, still living?
Living.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beating.
Yeah, heart beating.
Yeah.
Well, it is. What is it? I mean, I would say there's elements I talked about social justice, right? That is the common thread. But actually, it feels like a domino effect more than a thread. And I guess I've learned from my previous phases, and that's helped me take me into the next. So, for example, study politics and economics, international relations, naturally takes me into journalism. Journalism takes me to an international broadcaster. I learn about film and production in that realm. I leave there, I end up working in production and film. I start to care about health more. I open a climbing gym. You know what I mean? So you kind of, they all touch each other. Continuous thread, I'm not so sure, to be honest. But definitely these kind of magnetized moments that affect the next movements, for sure.
I mean, thank you so much for kind of sharing that domino effect and kind of all the experiences that you've had, I think have given, at least me personally, I'm sure everyone that's going to listen, great insights. And I think maybe even a push or a motivation to kind of think about, I think, commercials in a very different way. So we were very, very honored to have you here today. And thank you so much for being here.
I appreciate that. And you just made me think of one note, actually. Sometimes we do think of filmmaking as one thing and commercials as another. A lot of time, super successful film directors on long form features are asked and then eventually do some commercials because they have that gravitas. But what I would love to see, particularly in Qatar, is those filmmakers who care about the craft of short filmmaking, and perhaps that's what they can touch the most at the moment, trying it out in commercials, you know, because there's a real unique form of storytelling in commercials, and it's not an easy one. Telling a little story with a hook within 30 seconds, 60 seconds, there's something in that, and I think it's a playground for all filmmakers, commercial storytelling.
I can see that 100% because, you know, it's easier, I feel like, to some degree to try and explain an idea you already have. But I think it requires a whole level of creativity to try and figure out how do I present an idea in a way that's not my idea, but I feel like it's mine in a certain way. So
and it's over quicker. It starts and it's finished quicker. So I'd love to see that in Qatar a bit more.
Do you think that there's any way we can kind of encourage that space to grow?
Well, I often say in the film house, we're only as good as our clients. And by that, I mean they have certain products and, certain amount of briefs that go out every year. I think there's enough for a lot of the filmmakers here who may not have thought about commercial world to actually give it a go. And in doing that, you can come to the film house, come to production companies, knock on the doors, say, hey, I want to get into commercial storytelling, I want to direct, I want to shoot for commercials, I want to do whatever, light, color. I would encourage that because I think that the control we have is the grassroots element to some extent, stimulating the grassroots element of filmmaking And through the Film House in particular, although we have TFH Originals coming up where we can focus on narrative a bit more, we've mastered the commercial world in some respects. So I'd love a lot more local Qatar-based talent to be getting into commercials.
Here's to hoping that, you know, the years to come are going to have an influx of commercial storytellers from Qatar. And once again, I just love to thank you a lot for everything that you've shared with us today.
Thank you, Lafan. I appreciate it. Hopefully it was useful.
It was.